The sound of breaking glass shattered the quiet afternoon at Westlake Community College. Mark Donovan, a 42-year-old single father taking night classes to finish his long-abandoned degree, didn't hesitate. He rushed toward the commotion while others turned away. What happened next would change not only his life but his daughter's future in ways he could never have imagined. If you're wondering how a simple act of kindness can transform multiple lives overnight, stay with me until the end. And if this story touches your heart, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more inspiring real-life stories that remind us of the power of human connection. Mark had never planned to be a hero that day. He'd simply wanted to get through his economics class without falling asleep. Between working full-time at the local hardware store, raising his 16-year-old daughter Lily alone since his wife's death 5 years ago, and squeezing in classes whenever he could, exhaustion had become his constant companion. But he was determined to finish what he'd started 20 years earlier, before life's responsibilities had forced him to drop out. He wanted to show Lily that it was never too late to pursue your dreams. The campus coffee shop was Mark's sanctuary before evening classes. The familiar scent of freshly ground beans and the gentle hum of conversation helped clear his mind after a long day at work. He'd been nursing his black coffee, reviewing notes for an upcoming exam, when he heard the crash followed by a young woman's voice rising in distress. "Please, just leave me alone." The voice trembled with a mixture of fear and frustration. Mark looked up to see a petite young woman with dark-rimmed glasses and a messy ponytail backing away from a tall, athletic guy who towered over her. The shattered remains of a laptop lay on the floor between them. The cafe had gone silent, everyone watching but no one intervening. "You think you're so smart," the guy sneered, his voice carrying across the now quiet space. "Always showing everyone up in class. Maybe now you'll learn to keep your mouth shut when I'm speaking." Mark recognized the bully as Tyler Reynolds, the son of a prominent local businessman and star of the college basketball team. He'd seen Tyler around campus, always surrounded by admirers who seemed more impressed by his family name than his character. The young woman, Mark thought her name might be Ellie from the few times he'd seen her in his economics class, was visibly shaking now. "That had all my research on it," she said, her voice barely audible as she stared at the broken laptop. Something in Mark snapped. Maybe it was the thought of his own daughter facing such intimidation one day. Maybe it was the memory of all the times he'd stayed silent in his youth when he should have spoken up. Whatever the reason, he found himself on his feet, moving between Tyler and the young woman before he'd fully processed what he was doing. "That's enough," Mark said firmly, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. At 42, he wasn't physically imposing, but there was a quiet authority in his stance that came from years of parenting. "Walk away, Tyler." Tyler's face contorted with surprise, then anger. "Mind your own business, old man. This doesn't concern you." Mark didn't budge. "When you destroy someone's property and intimidate them in public, you make it everyone's business. Now back off before this becomes a bigger problem than it already is." A tense silence followed. Mark was acutely aware of his racing heart, of the spectators watching, of how ridiculous this confrontation might seem, a middle-aged hardware store employee facing off against a college athlete half his age. But he also thought of Lily, of the world he wanted her to live in, and he held his ground. Something in Mark's unwavering gaze must have given Tyler pause. After a moment, the younger man scoffed, muttered, "Whatever," and stalked out of the cafe, his friends trailing behind him. Only when Tyler was gone did Mark turn to the young woman, who was kneeling beside her broken laptop, carefully gathering the pieces. Up close, he could see tears threatening to spill from her eyes, though she was fighting hard to contain them. "Are you okay?" he asked gently, crouching down to help her. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Her hands were trembling as she collected the shattered screen. "I'm Mark," he said, offering his hand. "Mark Donovan." "Ellie Chen," she replied, her voice steadier than he expected. "Thank you for stepping in. Not many people would have." "I have a daughter about your age," Mark said, though in truth Lily was probably a few years younger than Ellie. I'd hoped someone would do the same for her. As they gathered the broken pieces, Mark learned that Ellie was a scholarship student majoring in business and economics. The laptop had contained her research project, months of work that she feared was now lost. Mark, who knew little about computers but a lot about fixing broken things, offered to take it to a friend who ran a repair shop. He's a miracle worker with electronics, Mark assured her. No promises, but if anyone can salvage your data, it's Dave. Ellie hesitated, then handed over the laptop with a grateful smile. I can't pay much, but... Mark waved away her concern. Let's see if he can help first. We can figure out the rest later. What Mark didn't know, what no one at Westlake Community College knew, was that Ellie Chen was not just any scholarship student. She was the daughter of James Chen, founder and CEO of Chen Tech Industries, one of the largest technology companies in the country. Ellie had insisted on attending a small community college under her mother's maiden name, determined to experience education without the weight of her family's reputation and fortune influencing how people treated her. For the past year, she had lived in a modest apartment near campus, taken public transportation, and worked part-time at the library, not out of necessity, but out of a desire to understand the real world before eventually joining her father's company. Only a handful of college administrators knew her true identity, and they had been generously compensated to maintain her privacy. As Mark walked Ellie to her next class, neither of them noticed Tyler Reynolds watching from across the quad, his humiliation festering into something dangerous. That evening, Mark called Dave about the laptop while preparing dinner for Lily. His daughter listened to the story with wide eyes, perched on a kitchen stool as she worked on her homework. Dad, you confronted Tyler Reynolds? Lily asked incredulously. He's like, infamous. His dad owns half the businesses in town. Mark shrugged, stirring the pasta sauce. Being rich doesn't give anyone the right to bully others. Remember that, Lil. Lily rolled her eyes affectionately. Yes, Dad, I know. You've only told me 1,000 times. But there was pride in her voice as she added, still, that was pretty brave. Mark smiled, though inwardly he worried about potential repercussions. The Reynolds family was indeed influential locally, and Mark couldn't afford any trouble that might affect his job or his ability to finish his degree. But he pushed those concerns aside. He'd done what was right, and that was what mattered. The next day, Dave called with surprising news. He'd managed to recover most of the data from Ellie's laptop, but the machine itself was beyond repair. Mark arranged to meet Ellie after his shift to deliver the recovered files on a borrowed external hard drive. When he arrived at the campus coffee shop, Ellie was already waiting, her face lighting up when she saw him. Any luck? She asked hopefully. Mark handed her the hard drive. Dave managed to save about 90% of your files. The laptop itself is toast, though. Ellie's relief was palpable. Thank you so much, she said, clutching the hard drive like a lifeline. You have no idea what this means to me. Happy to help, Mark replied, settling into the chair across from her. Though I'm afraid you'll need to get a new computer. Ellie nodded, her expression turning thoughtful. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about that. And about yesterday. She hesitated, then continued, I'd like to repay you somehow. For standing up for me, and for saving my work. Mark shook his head. That's not necessary. Really? At least let me buy you coffee, Ellie insisted. And maybe you could tell me more about your daughter? You mentioned she's in high school? Something about Ellie's genuine interest broke through Mark's usual reserve. Before he knew it, he was telling her about Lily, her passion for science, her dream of becoming a marine biologist, and his concerns about affording college for her in a few years. She's brilliant, Mark said, pride evident in his voice. Gets it from her mother. Sarah was the smart one in our relationship. She was halfway through her PhD when we found out about the cancer. He paused, the familiar ache of loss momentarily overwhelming him. "Sorry, I don't usually dump my life story on people I've just met." "Don't apologize," Ellie said softly. "It sounds like you're doing an amazing job raising her on your own." Their conversation flowed easily after that, moving from family to their shared interest in economics. Mark was surprised to discover how knowledgeable Ellie was. Her insights into market trends and economic theory went far beyond what he'd expect from a typical undergraduate. "You really know your stuff," he commented. "Planning on a career in finance?" A shadow of something, amusement? Secrecy, crossed Ellie's face. "Something like that," she replied vaguely. "What about you? What made you decide to go back to school after all these years?" Mark explained his desire to move into management at the hardware store, or perhaps even open his own small business someday. "The owner's retiring next year, and he's hinted that he might sell to me if I can put together the financing. A business degree would help with that." "That's admirable," Ellie said. "Not many people would have the courage to go back to school mid-career." Mark laughed. "Not sure if it's courage or stubbornness. Lily calls it my midlife crisis. Says at least it's cheaper than buying a sports car." They were still laughing when Tyler Reynolds entered the cafe with 3 of his teammates. The atmosphere immediately tensed as Tyler spotted them and changed course, heading directly for their table. Well, Tyler drawled, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "If it isn't the old man and his charity case." Mark stood slowly, positioning himself between Tyler and Ellie. "We're just having coffee, Tyler. No need for trouble." Tyler's smile was cold. "No trouble. Just wanted to let you know I talked to my father about yesterday. He was very interested to hear how a hardware store employee threatened his son." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Dad's golf buddies with your boss, you know. And with the dean. Might want to think about that next time you decide to play hero." Before Mark could respond, Ellie stood up. "Are you actually threatening him?" she asked, her voice steady and clear. "Because that would be incredibly stupid, even for you." Tyler turned his attention to her, sneering. "Look who found her voice. What are you going to do about it, scholarship girl? Run to the administration? My family donates more to this college in a year than your tuition is worth." Something shifted in Ellie's demeanor, a straightening of her shoulders, a coolness entering her eyes. For a moment, she looked older, more authoritative. "You really don't want to do this, Tyler," she said quietly. Tyler laughed. "Or what?" Ellie simply smiled, pulled out her phone, and made a call. "Hi, Dad," she said, her eyes never leaving Tyler's face. "Sorry to bother you, but I'm having a situation at school I think you might want to handle personally." She paused, listening. "Yes, that would be perfect. We're at the campus coffee shop." "And Dad?" "Bring Lawrence with you." She ended the call and put her phone away, still smiling pleasantly at Tyler, whose confidence had visibly faltered. "Who's Lawrence?" Mark asked, confused by the sudden shift in dynamics. "My father's attorney," Ellie replied calmly. "He should be here in about 20 minutes." Tyler scoffed, though with less conviction than before. "You expect me to believe your daddy and his lawyer are just dropping everything to rush over here? Please." "You're welcome to wait and see," Ellie said, sitting back down and taking a sip of her coffee as if they were discussing the weather. Uncertain but unwilling to back down completely, Tyler and his friends retreated to a table across the cafe, occasionally glancing toward the door. "Ellie," Mark said quietly, "I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I don't want you making things up on my account. It could make the situation worse." Ellie looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "I'm not making anything up, Mark. There's something I should probably tell you." She was interrupted by a commotion at the cafe entrance. A tall, distinguished-looking Asian man in an impeccable suit entered, followed by another man carrying a leather briefcase. The cafe fell silent as the first man scanned the room, his gaze landing on Ellie. "Dad," Ellie said, standing to greet him with a hug. "Thank you for coming." Mark watched in growing confusion as Ellie introduced him to James Chen, a name he vaguely recognized but couldn't place, and Lawrence Baxter, who indeed appeared to be an attorney based on his formal demeanor and the business card he handed to Mark. "Mr. Donovan," James Chen said, shaking Mark's hand firmly. "My daughter tells me you came to her aid yesterday. I'm extremely grateful." "It was nothing, sir," Mark replied automatically, still trying to process what was happening. Across the cafe, Tyler and his friends were watching with undisguised shock. "On the contrary," James said. "Standing up for others is never nothing. Now, Eleanor mentioned there was some trouble today as well." Ellie nodded toward Tyler's table. "That's Tyler Reynolds. He broke my laptop yesterday and just now threatened Mark's job and his standing at the college because his father has connections." James Chen's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "I see. Lawrence, would you mind having a word with young Mr. Reynolds while I speak with Eleanor and Mr. Donovan?" As the attorney approached Tyler's table, James guided Mark and Ellie outside to a sleek black car waiting by the curb. Only when they were seated in the privacy of the vehicle did Mark find his voice. "I'm sorry, but what exactly is going on? Who are you?" James exchanged a glance with his daughter, who looked slightly embarrassed. "I should have told you sooner," Ellie admitted. "My full name is Eleanor Chen. James is my father, and he's the founder and CEO of Chen Tech Industries." Mark's mind raced to catch up. Chen Tech, one of the largest technology companies in the world. He'd seen James Chen on magazine covers, in news segments about innovation and entrepreneurship. And Ellie was his daughter. "But you're taking night classes at a community college," Mark said, the pieces not quite fitting together in his mind. Ellie smiled ruefully. "I wanted to experience education without my family name opening doors or creating expectations. I've been living like a regular student for the past year, using my mother's maiden name." "Eleanor has always been independent," James added, a note of pride in his voice. "She insisted on proving herself before joining the company." Mark sat back, processing this revelation. "So yesterday, when Tyler broke your laptop." "It wasn't about the machine," Ellie confirmed. "I could have replaced it easily. But the principle mattered. And then you stepped in when no one else would, not knowing who I was, just because it was the right thing to do." Her expression softened. "That meant a lot to me." James Chen studied Mark thoughtfully. "My daughter tells me you're working toward a business degree while raising a teenage daughter on your own and working full-time. That's commendable." Mark shrugged, uncomfortable with the attention. "Just doing what needs to be done, sir." "Dad," Ellie said suddenly, "what did Lawrence say to Tyler?" James smiled slightly. "He informed Mr. Reynolds that Chinteka's legal department would be very interested in pursuing charges for destruction of property, harassment, and now attempted intimidation of a witness. He also mentioned that while the Reynolds family may have local influence, they might find themselves outmatched in this particular situation." "You didn't have to do that," Mark protested. "I can handle Tyler." "I have no doubt," James replied. "But Eleanor is my daughter, and you protected her when I couldn't. Allow me to return the favor." He paused, then continued more seriously. "Mr. Donovan, Mark, I understand you're interested in business ownership?" The abrupt change of subject caught Mark off guard. "Eventually, yes. My boss is retiring next year and considering selling the hardware store. But that's a long way off. I'd need to finish my degree and secure financing." James nodded thoughtfully. Chintech has a community investment program that provides loans and grants to promising small businesses, particularly those that serve as anchors in their communities. A hardware store would certainly qualify. He hand.